Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the book launch of Deepak Gupta Sir's Small Things Matter, which is the key to good governance. I have the honor and the true privilege to introduce today's panel. Today's panel, of course, we have the author, Mr. Deepak Gupta himself, BA from Allahabad University, MA History from the well renowned, very popular, and most sought after St. Stephen's College, MPhil from JNU, thereafter MPA from Kennedy School at the Harvard University as a Mason Fellow. IAS batch of 1974. Please be patient, sir's credentials just keep going. Such an accomplished man, I'm so privileged to be introducing him today. Declared as the best IAS probationer of the 1974-76 professional course, 39 years of service, out of which 9 were spent in health, was also the advisor to the WHO in New Delhi, retired as secretary of the MNRE in September 2011, continued his career in public service as chairman of UPSC. He thereafter retired in September 2016. Best-selling author of Participatory Immigration Management in the year of 2000, covering a billion with dots in the year 2004. His third book, Achieving Universal Energy Access in India, which was published in the year 2015. The next one was Caught by the Police, a biography co-authored with his siblings in order of his father, Anand Swarup Gupta. And now, I'm very, very honored to announce the launch of his latest book, The Steel Frame. Sorry, I'm very sorry. His last book was The Steel Frame, a history of the IS in the year 2019. Bear with me, I'm a little too excited clearly. But yes, I'm very, very honored and privileged to launch Sir's latest book, as I said, Small Things Matter, which is the key to good governance. So, without further ado, allow me to also introduce today's other panelist, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, an historian, public policy analyst, festival director of Value of Words, an international literature and arts festival which is held in Dehradun. He's also an alumni of JNU, and of course the globally acclaimed Cornell University. Sir was an IS officer from the batch of 1985, later superannuated as the director of the most prestigious and honorable institution Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy of Administration in Mussoorie, also known as Labasna. We also have with us today another extremely accomplished individual, someone who's very sought after and looked up to, Mr. Erwin Saxena, an alumni of Delhi College of Engineering and IIT Delhi. Sir was 1978 batch civil servant, served in the Indian Postal Service for 10 years. Thereafter, he joined the Research and Analysis Wing, also known as the RAW, of the Cabinet Secretariat in 1988. He also headed the Aviation Research Center. Before joining the UPSC in May 2015 after his retirement, Sir also served thereafter from June 2018 to August 2020 as the chairperson of UPSC. Post-retirement, Mr. Saxena contributes to some leading newspapers on topics related to the Indian economy, social harmony, civil administration, technology, ethics, among many others. We also have with us another very eminent personality, Mr. JVR Prasada Rao. He is an alumni of Andhra University. Sir has served as the Secretary of the Government of West Bengal. He has also been the Director General of the National AIDS Control Organization of the Government of India. Sir has also been the Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare until 2002. Thereafter, he served as the Principal Secretary of the Health Ministry, Government of India from 2002 to 2004. He has also served as Regional Director, Asia Pacific of UN AIDS. Mr. Prasada Rao has also been Senior Advisor to UN AIDS. Was also a member of UN Secretary General Special Envoy on AIDS in the Asia Pacific region. Currently serving as a member of the ICMR Task Force on COVID-19, he is also the member of Global Advisory Board of West Bengal on COVID-19. Clearly, I've been very, very nervous in introducing such an esteemed panel because their credentials speak for themselves. But yes, it is a true honor to be a part of this event and be the publisher of Sir's latest book, which is Small Things Matter, a key to good governance. For those of you watching this event, thank you for attending. Welcome to today's talk. Also, at the end of the event, you could scroll down to the description box and find links to purchase Sir's book. So, without further ado, I'll hand over today's session to Dr. Chopra.
Thank you, Amit. As we all assemble here today, uh, I'm at the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. But we'll begin by first offering a tribute to one of the most distinguished civil servants in the country, Mr. Keshav Desi Raju, who passed away earlier this morning. Uh, I speak on behalf of the entire civil service fraternity in the country when I say that he was one of the most honest, most forthright, a person who could speak truth to power and power to truth. He was a deputy director at the time when I was training here, and since morning, all our batchmates, all those who are from the, let's say, from the 83 to the 86, 87 batches who had training under him, as of course across the country, several tributes have poured in. When I spoke to the author of the book, he said, yes, it would be only befitting that we begin by offering a tribute to one of the finest civil servants which this country has produced. So after acknowledging and recognizing the work of Mr. Keshav Desaraj, who also incidentally was the Secretary of Health to the Union Government and has held several important positions both in Uttarakhand, UP and this place, we now move on to the book under discussion, Small Things Matter. Now, before I invite the author and the star for today, let me just quote the most seminal lines from this book. And what Mr. Gupta says is, the work of government and administration takes place and is noticed in everyday transactions and exchanges. It is the small, boring things that make an impact and which call for effective governance. Whether it is the garbage collected, the road paved, the drain cleaned, the ATM functional, tax refunded after transparent assessment, licenses, passports, registration done without hassle, and so on. So it's not just the mega policy or the mega narrative that we are talking about. It is in the day to day. It is in the here and now. If these things are better, if there is ease of living, then there will be ease of doing business, and the country will go along. With these few words, as Mr. Deepak Gupta has already been introduced, let me not spend the time again. But over to you, sir. You wrote this book, your thoughts while writing this book, and how do you feel now that Small Things Matter is going to become a big book insofar as governance reform is concerned?
Let's hope so. But I join you, Sanjeev, for the, paying my tribute to Keshav Desi Raju, and he was a fine officer and a thorough gentleman. But let's go ahead. Dear colleagues and friends, I thank you all for joining this event today. I thank Unique Publishers, my senior, Mr. Prasada Rao, my UPSC colleague, Mr. Erwin Saxena, and my good friend, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, for their reviews and presence here today. I also thank the colleagues who have worked with me and have sent their video clips, which will be shown later. You know, as I grew up, I used to see how small things made a difference. And I saw that in my career too. So this provided the initial trigger to write about it some years back. But it was only now that the lockdown provided the time and opportunity. My book, therefore, is a very simple story with a simple message of how small things will make a huge difference in outcomes, good or bad. Every anecdote that I relate and every issue related to my experience that I discuss emphasizes this point directly or indirectly. So I look at it from 3 points of view, which I wanted the book to show. First, we tend to neglect so-called small things that have a great impact on a nation's strength and the well-being of its people. For example, the wanton neglect of public health, which this pandemic has shown at great cost, or the filth of garbage in our cities and the neglect of processing all kinds of urban waste. So I have highlighted many such issues in the book. In a way, they provide us food for thought as well as an agenda for action. Second, the nature of our administrative system and processes is not geared to get results. Discouragement for taking risk or innovation, endless delays, casual approach, lack of consultation, not looking at the nuts and bolts. I give examples of how very good results can be achieved by overcoming these obstacles and how routine administrative instruments like meetings, reviews field visits, etc., can be best used. And the third aspect relates to the attitude. We must have a can-do attitude. Lots of small things come into play. Anticipation and preparation or its lack, as we have seen in the pandemic. Constant desire to innovate and improve. Take initiative. Focus on getting things done, resolving small problems as they arise. We don't have the luxury of time. I always used to tell my officers that the word tomorrow does not exist in my dictionary, only yesterday. And above all, I think we must all have passion. Hopefully, all these things you will see in the examples. And I hope that this may enthuse and encourage young officers. So, in this way, the book has three objectives. First, to emphasize that joining the IA is not just a job, it's a calling and a mission. Public service becomes moral imperative and its own reward. Second, even though the country is witnessing extreme politicization, there is a huge open space for us public servants to design good policies and to deliver public services efficiently. The people of India to whom this book is dedicated expect better from us, public servants, and we must deliver. And third, I hope that the term small things matter enters the architecture and vocabulary of day-to-day administration and governance, and it will become one of the keys to unlock good governance. I have written this book in the spirit of yes, we can, and yes, we must. And I hope it can make a small difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, the focus on attitude and passion is a big takeaway from here because, when we had joined the academy, the focus was on knowledge, skills, and attitude. Now, the whole thing is it is attitude, skills, and knowledge because if you have a positive attitude, skills you can pick up and knowledge is available all over. With these words, let me invite Mr. Erwin Saxena, former chairman of UPSC and someone who I've had the pleasure of knowing, to speak about the book and his key thoughts on small things matter. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, Sanjeev. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Very clearly, sir.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Mr. Gupta, for requesting me to write a review of your book. I mean, I'll be very honest. I was not really commenting upon the content. I was commenting more about the subject. Civil services and their state in India has been a matter of passion for all of us. And all of us, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we have been troubled by the kind of criticism which has been thrown at the civil services over the last several decades. Not a few years, several decades. Now, initially, it used to be about corruption. People would normally say that there's corruption at every level, at the higher level, lower level, wherever. And gradually, it has come to a state where people are commenting about the competence of the civil services, their ability to innovate. They are looked upon as people who stand in the way of progress, stumbling blocks, procrastinators, whatever. I mean, it's become fashionable to criticize the civil service. Now, corruption, of course, remains an issue. And so when Mr. Deepak Gupta wrote this book, I thought this was the right occasion to say that, the time has come, that we have to tell people about what the civil services actually do and deliver in the shape of building up the nation and bringing progress, economic progress and technical progress to the masses. So I looked upon these memoirs as an opportunity to let people, not only the civil services officers and the civil services aspirants, everybody, to know that the civil services do a human job to hold this nation together and move it on the path of progress. There are plenty of anecdotes, and I'm sure many of our people will be speaking about the contents of the book, the specific contents and incidents of the book. But I look upon every experience which has been mentioned in the book as a lesson in management. The reason I say this is that the criticism also has been that the civil services do not have domain expertise, that they need to bring in fresh blood, to bring in domain expertise. Now, my question often is that if an officer like Mr. Gupta can act as a CEO from the day he joined the services till the day he retired, bringing results. Within the constraints, within the resources, limited resources, he can produce results, he can deliver. He is a CEO. That is his domain expertise. People go abroad, do MBAs costing crores of rupees. If they are domain experts, why not the civil servants? We manage things, we deliver for the people, for 130 crore people. So this is what I would like this book to carry as a message to people, that please understand that the civil servant looks into the nitty-gritty of things. He looks at the small things, and then he delivers for the country and the nation as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for pointing out that the civil servant is also a specialist. In fact, as Mr. Rajiv Gauba, the cabinet secretary, once he was addressing an MCTP here. So he said, we are specialists of the context. If there's anyone who understands governance, if there's anyone who understands the district and the state and the ecosystem of working with sub-districts, districts, states, and India, then it is the civil services who do a much better job than anybody else. Thank you so much, sir. May I now request Mr. JVR Prasad Rao, a very respected colleague from the West Bengal cadre, my own cadre, to please speak about the book and also about his experiences and what he would like to share with all of us. And we have today with us civil servants who have superannuated, civil servants who are still in service, and a lot of people who are aspiring to be civil servants. So it's an intergenerational dialogue that's happening at this point of time. Over to you, sir. You are muted, sir. You will have to unmute yourself. You are muted, sir.
Muted. Sir, you are muted. You have to unmute.
So why don't you give him a call, sir? Okay, while Mr. Prasad Rao is coming online, we have a lot of people who are connected with us on the YouTube.
Sorry, I joined.
Questions and put them on the channel. Mr. Prasad Rao is now with us. Over to you, sir.
Sorry, I think there is some glitch here. Anyway, thank you, Sanjeev, and nice to see you and hear you virtually. Even though we are batchmates, we never had our cadre mates, we never had the pleasure of meeting each. But I would start again by paying tribute to K.C. Desiraju, a dear colleague of mine. It's a great loss for me personally. I think I've worked with him very closely. But coming to the issue today, I think Deepak, once again, congratulations to you for bringing out another outstanding book. I have read it and I wrote a few lines on that, whatever I could. But I think what you mentioned there, small things matter. I think that is the real challenge today in the country, in the administration. Because we all started our careers as implementers, basically as SDOs or ADMs or district magistrates, etc. But once we come to the safe confines of the secretariat or senior positions, slowly people start looking ignorant over a period of time. And ignorance brings in certain amount of diffidence in you, and you don't want to learn. And that is the time when you start guarding your turf very closely. And many a time I have seen civil servants themselves acting as stumbling blocks in the way of reforms and innovations. That is the tragedy of our administration. And I am glad that Deepak has pointed out some of these things. And when he says small things matter, basically he is referring to the huge implementation challenge that we face in this country. We are great planners, we are great visionaries, we bring excellent documents, excellent policies, but when it comes to implementation, it flounders there because we lose touch with the field. We don't know what is happening at the cutting edge level where people constantly interact with the type of things that Deepak mentioned and Sanjeev just mentioned about. Those things, people just don't like to sort of go and see what is happening. This is where Deepak made a big difference. I had the occasion to work with in the health ministry when he was joint secretary and I was the Director General of NACO. I was also looking after the National TB Control Program and other disease programs. And the way he fought for looking at implementation with all seriousness and overcoming some of the hurdles that even the specialists used to put in the way of effective implementation. That's how people have to work. And the other issue which I have noticed is regarding the Food and Drug Administration, which he mentioned in the book. Before he came in, that was the most neglected area in the ministry. But when he took over, he saw that some of the food notifications have been brought in. In fact, he mentioned them in the book. Today, we all take them for granted, as if, what is the big deal? But the amount of struggle that we had to put in to get these notifications out, like, the best before notification or the veg non-veg notification, some of them, they are path-breaking measures, path-breaking reforms, which have been brought because of the touch that Deepak maintained with the field and brought those feedbacks into the system and saw that the reforms have taken place. I remember a small comic anecdote also I mentioned. After seeing the notification on veg non-veg, one of the lady ministers, who was an activist, animal rights activist, she came and said even drugs should be classified as veg and non-veg. But then she won't listen. Javed Chaudhary, who was a minister, secretary, said, how can this be? So ultimately we have to tell her, madam, human blood is also an essential thing, as a drug. It is classified as a drug. Do you think anybody can live without having a blood transfusion if there's an accident or something like that? Then ultimately she realized, and then she stopped intervening in those things. So some of these things, I came back to my memory when I was reading the book. Then when he left the health ministry, he again came back a few years after I retired. And then as Additional Secretary Health, again some of the things like the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which actually started when I was about to leave the ministry. Sushma Swaraj was the minister. She was a great visionary. She said there should be All India Institute of Medical Sciences in about 6 states. And then I think Deepak carried those things forward. And today all of them are there as very good institutions working there. And the other value I share with Deepak is about the importance of public health, which he mentioned just now. I think the COVID pandemic has clearly brought out the neglect, the constant neglect of public health in the last 30 years. We have not been spending even 1% of our GDP on public health. And he is very right when he said that is a huge blunder that we made by merging the Department of Health and Department of Family Welfare. In the process, we lost that focus on public health. And the case that he made out to have a separate Department of Public Health, we all feel that that is the most important and that need to be done. And another thing that he did was that the Public Health Foundation of India, which actually was in the conceptual stage when I left the ministry, he took it forward. Today is one of the very flourishing public health institutions in the country, having some 4 or 5 public health schools. So a small plant seed that you plant, today grows into a big tree. So that is the type of vision that Deepak has shown. Of course, later on he became Secretary of Environment. He's worked on solar energy. And finally, as the chair of the UPSC, which produced many young budding IAS officers and civil service officers, he had a very high point in his career. So starting from SDO right up to Chairman UPSC, it has been a great career. And documenting it for the youngsters, I think is a great idea. And I know how difficult writing a book is. With one book I have been sweating, and Deepak has been able to write about 4 or 5 books. So it's a great achievement, Deepak, and once again, congratulations. And thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. In fact, I had suggested, that an alternate title could have been, trifles make perfection, but perfection is not a trifle. And I think to sort of reflect, so let me ask from this book itself, you started your career as the SDO of Baroni. So can you share us some of your experience from that place, doing what is right, and that is something which you started as the SDO Baroni itself.
Actually, I was a video Baroni under training,
yes.
And the lesson that I mentioned, and which has made with me lifetime, and it's important for everybody, and that's why I mentioned it. It was a very, very small matter of the our peon, claiming wrong TA bill of a few rupees. And I objected. I said, I'm not going to sign it. वो लोग बोला था अब हमेशा ऐसा होता है. He's the head of the union and he's a very powerful person and we'll have lots of problems. I said nothing doing. So when we were having our farewell, this chap got up. I expected a lot of criticism, and he said, I was very angry at first, and then I realized that you had done the right thing. And more importantly, he said you had the courage to do the right thing, even if it was so small. And then he said, he was quite aged, and he said, you are a young guy, you have your full career in front of you, I bless you. Remember this, always, do what is right. That is what he said. And these words came to me again and again and again. And in that sense, there is no ethical dilemma at all. Just do the right thing. So that's the lesson I have written about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also shows that we get inspiration from everything around us. I mean, what this person told you at the time of your farewell, at the time of your leaving the district. And the other thing which for the young aspirants and the younger civil servants is that you make your reputation from day one. From day one, whatever we do as PDOs, SDOs, that's something which will carry us throughout our life. So would you like to now tell me about, as an SDM, you expedited the court work, you brought about a certain method in this.
So a lot of learnings there, but one big learning was about the judicial delays. We had simple revenue cases, large number of them. I don't know why people fought so much. And there was a huge pendency. For some reason, which I have described in the book, the lawyers boycotted my court, which of course was an issue at that time. So I then decided to go to the court. I asked the people, if you are willing, I am willing to listen to your case. And they said yes. I was quite surprised that they want to put their trust in me without help of a lawyer. But they did. And that's a lesson in itself, that you inspire confidence by your behavior. And then all the cases got disposed of. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the next month, Tuesday, the next Wednesday. And I was thinking a revolution of finishing off the pendency. Then the lawyer naturally, they came back and we sort of stepped back. And the lesson is that there are many other issues other than the vacancies of judges, etc., which lead to the accumulation of cases. And later on in the book, they have explained how there are so many rape cases pending and how check bouncing cases doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And so I think this judicial delay issue is very, very important small thing.
No, it's so therefore what Mr. Deepak Gupta is saying is take the bull by the horns and set the right thing and be the matador that you are, because that is what will set things rolling. I'll encourage all the youngsters, all the young officers and all the young aspirants to keep posing your questions on the YouTube channel. And now we shall have a short video on the comments which have been made by those who work with Mr. Deepak Gupta. And these include Ms. Rashmi Verma, Mr. Sudhir Kumar, Ms. Shruti Sehgal, Gauri Singh, and Mr. Vinayak Prasad. So you're going to see a short clip of these videos, and may I also request that you can keep putting your questions on YouTube. We'll try to address as many as we can. Over to the video clip.
Hello everybody, I am Sudhir Kumar Rakesh, a Bihar cadre IAS officer of 1983 batch. You may not believe that I am 9 years junior to Mr. Deepak Gupta in service. In fact, if both of us stand together, you may feel that I was the district magistrate and he was my probationer. Really a great privilege for me to have worked with him in the district of Rohtas. We would plan in the evening and next day everything will be carried out. Predetermined visits to the field. Most of the time we were in the field. Manuals prepared on how to do work, very, very small manuals, not more than 5-6 pages. We were having panchayat camps in all the blocks of the district simultaneously. And every Saturday, these panchayat camps would be held. Each panchayat camp would be attended by one senior officer. The camps would be held by rotation. Every week, it would be in another panchayat. We would inspect schemes, go there, go to the field, see if there are any problems, try to troubleshoot, find out, get feedback. And we even used to carry checkbooks in the field. If some BDO told us that he was running short of funds, then he did not have to send a formal requisition and all that. A small one-page requisition, which was almost standardized, he would sign it and give it to us, and we would write out a check then and there. So innovations were there, and it used to be a lot of fun, and nothing would get postponed for the next day. Everything had to be cleared, all files, everything had to be cleared the same day. In September 87, I went there as Deputy Development Commissioner, but within 10 days of my joining the district of Rohtas, I started feeling like a probationer. And I have told it to all my friends so many times, in Rohtas I did not work as a Deputy Development Commissioner. I worked as a probationer. It was great. It was great.
Engineers who were the real culprit, So the remaining cases, we decided to, have proper departmental proceeding against those engineers. Followed all the procedures and ensured that they were actually punished the way they should have been. And because of the fact that all the procedures were followed, there were no court cases. Disposal of large number of vigilance cases also led to dropping of many of the contempt cases. This may appear to be small in nature, but this went a long way in boosting the morale of the engineering cadre in the department on the one hand, and on the other hand, it left us a lot of time to focus on real development issues rather than running to the courts and looking at vigilance matters. It was Sir's vision, which guided us, and I think his book has brought out very aptly that it is very, very important to give our attention to these so-called smaller issues if we want to really deliver. I wish you all the best.
I worked with Mr. Deepak Gupta as a WHO consultant when he was a joint secretary in the Health Ministry for developing public-private partnerships in TB control. For the first time, we brought all the other departments on board and developed very fruitful partnerships with the private sector, NGOs, working in the field and community itself through dedicated dot providers. All became partners, whether medical college or coal mines or tea gardens or NGO hospitals or self-help groups. We increased and upgraded facilities for testing and treatment within the community. We visited all the sites, whether urban slums, Sundarbans or tribal areas. All stakeholders were fully involved. All projects started in a small way and TB control became a real community program. We had a very ambitious program to cover India fully within a time period with dots. We were constantly in touch with all the districts to follow up. Sometimes, Mr. Gupta knew a matter pending with a collector even before he did, and he would call them up. Every small thing was followed up. There was a great teamwork and everybody seemed driven by a sense of mission. WHO, who termed India as a laggard in TB control, by 2004 they were talking of the inspirational story coming out of India. So our little strokes fell great oaks. Thank you.
I'm glad Mr. Deepak Gupta's latest book focuses on small things matter. They actually matter. When I was working with Mr. Gupta in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in India a couple of years ago, there was a huge project which was stuck, the Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Raksha Yojana, 6 new aims and 13 upgradations. So getting 19 places and working across the country was a challenge with very limited resources. So what we did was to create small project teams and look at every minor detail. One thing which I can share it was very interesting for me, and I had never done it, was to do a note for the record over the previous note for the record, and it would go on like that. So for 6 months, 8 months, one could see exactly from those older note for the record on the grounds for not moving forward or what are the challenges. So those are the minor details which actually help the project take off. And now we can see that we have these institutions and they're very strong and now running well. Of course, it did take some time. Another incident was when the avian flu, the bird flu happened. And again, I saw him take a lot of interest in building institutional capacity, lab strengthening, surveillance. I was responsible, for example, in a small way to help identify the labs and build that capacity with NICD, the National Center for Disease Control now. So it was quite interesting to see how he would look at those little details. And all of these lessons are actually important even for current COVID pandemic. And I'm sure these anecdotal and some factual stories which he's put in the book would be extremely helpful for the current lot of health and policy makers to look at and make best use of his wide-ranging experiences of more than 40 years. Congratulations, sir, for this book.
Let me thank sir for giving me this opportunity to share my views. So at the time Mr. Deepak Gupta joined the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, it was still at a very early stage of transforming into its future potential. And sir, as people who know him would know, is a man of ideas, a true believer in going to the field to identify gaps in policy implementation. And I remember a time when he came back from a trip in Bihar where he'd gone to look at issues around biomass electrification. And he came to our office and took out this small black notepad that he used to carry with him. And we were struck at how many things he had observed and ideated in just one trip. But with him, we knew that work had to start on all fronts because he would monitor and persevere till all the nuts and bolts were firmly in place. So I also think it's his ability to break down complex issues into simple principles and ideas while keeping the big picture in mind. And that's what made the framing of the National Solar Mission policy so successful. From him, I learned that it's important not just to be able to arrive at the right conclusion through iterative processes, but also have the guts to hold on to them in the face of opposing forces and vested interests. And let me quickly give two examples of ideas that form the bedrock of the solar mission. The reverse auction, for which there was huge opposition, but it's an idea that stuck and is still working against all odds. And the other was mandating of local content, which unfortunately got thrown out of the window after a few years. But we all know the heavy cost we have paid as a country for doing that. So let me end by expressing my best wishes on this occasion of the launch of the book on Sir's memoirs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, friends. I'm sure you've enjoyed these recollections from the colleagues of Mr. Deepak Gupta. May I request you, sir, to unmute yourself. And Mr. Deepak Gupta, sir, you kindly unmute yourself. You were the youngest collector in the country at that point of time because you were also one of the youngest people to join the civil service. So tell us about your stint as the youngest collector, number one. And then how did you turn Rohtas around from one of the one of the districts which was not doing well to one of the best performing districts in the country?
I won't tell about the youngest collector, that was Sarsa, but that was the learning process. Of course, there were many things, but I'll come to the second one. And in fact, in Bihar, I became the oldest or the senior most collector after having served in Brussels. But I was transferred there almost overnight, and I had to go there alone. My family had to go to Delhi. I found the situation in dire straits. First, the district was 39th and last in the performance of rural development of the previous year, and the crime situation was very bad. You know, out of 23 gangsters who had rewards on their heads in the state, 22 were from that district. And there was an atmosphere of fear and terror, and the administration was sleeping. So that was the situation. But Sudhir Rakesh, in his little video, has tried to show the kind of things we had to do, and which I have described in detail in the chapter, you know, constantly in the field, trying to resolve problems, and doing quality work and getting the faith of the people. And by the way, so next year we came first, and out of those 22 gangsters, all were either in jail or dead. So it was a complete turnaround. But I just want to mention two things, and that is about trust and credibility. After we had built a lot of houses under the then Indira Awas Yojana, with a new design which was a Pakka house, scheduled caste people groups who came to me about 30-40, ke saab, you break my houses where we are living in, and then we'll wait for 4 months elsewhere and you build our houses. But how such a group could put faith in an administration is the issue for people to think about. And then that became the model, and we built hundreds of houses. In fact, we got 4 crores from the government of India to my district. The second was that we were building gully nali, drain with, in the road, and drain in the main villages, the main road of the village, because they were very filthy. Then we ran out of money and we were running out of bricks, etc. So people used to come and dump bricks there. In other words, it became a kind of a partnership, and we were able to double our output. So there were so many small things like this that we did, and we were able to, it will take a long time to explain. So the chapter has it all, and so it was like adrenaline flowing, and it shows what can be done. It just shows what can be done.
So wonderful, sir. So where there's a will, there's a way, and you've shown it. There are many things in this book. There are international experiences, there are experiences from the UN, the WHO. But I want you to talk about what you learned from Bangladesh. Because, we often think that all lessons have to be learned from the West. We think that it is only, Sweden or Norway which can teach us things. But in Mr. Deepak Gupta's book, there's an interesting insight about how we can learn from our neighbors. And I would like you, therefore, sir, to reflect about your learnings from Bangladesh on the water and the sanitation sector.
Well, we went on a UNICEF-sponsored trip to Bangladesh, and we went far away from Dhaka. So it was really a rural area. And it was a pleasant shock, the kind of things that we saw. You see, the two things were there. They priced water. So there was a value to it. A person, you can get a pump at some low cost, but he has to pay for it, and then he is obliged to provide water to 3 or 4 neighboring families and charge them some money. And then there was an ecosystem built over there where, panchayat markets were there, everything was available, there were a lot of female plumbers available, so maintenance was not a problem. So this became a sustainable thing. And there was also behavioral change. Everybody accepted going to the toilet, using it, and therefore. And that is why, Human Development Index parameters, Bangladesh much better. And this is 1995. They had already achieved. And when I came back, I wanted to try to do these things in India. We couldn't. I sent a big note to the Planning Commission, but that must have gone somewhere. And we are still struggling with providing drinking water. And of course, the Prime Minister's program of Swachh Bharat has been very impactful. I hope the use of toilets. So it was a lesson that the people's needs must be met. And of course, on the side, there were 2 other things. One was primary education, which was good in rural areas. and every house seemed to have a vegetable garden, and so therefore a question of diets and diversification of that, but that's another big issue.
And I just like to mention here, because I was collector of Murshidabad, which was the neighboring district to Bangladesh. And the community radio of Bangladesh would talk about condoms, would talk about family planning, would talk about all these things in an absolutely in a very normal manner. And that was the time when we were still struggling, whether we can have this discussion on TV or whether we can have this discussion on radio. And I found that Bangladesh was so open about so many things. So a lot of lessons to be learned from everywhere. We keep our eyes and ears open. Now we started getting questions from the audience, and the bulk of the questions related to lateral entry into the civil services. So I think I'll open up this discussion and invite Mr. Erwin Saxena and Mr. Prasada also to share their views before we ask Mr. Deepak Gupta, and I encourage more and more questions on the chat box. First to you, Mr. Erwin Saxena, sir, on your thoughts on lateral entry.
My thoughts on lateral entry.
Well,
okay. The first experiment with lateral entry happened sometime in late 2018-19, and the government opened up 10 posts at the level of joint secretary for specific ministries. The government had initially issued the advertisements themselves, and they wanted to do the recruitment on their own. But eventually the UPSC was roped in, and since the UPSC's mandate is to select candidates for the government, at least recommend candidates, it's for the government to pick up, we had to start thinking in terms of how to go about selecting the best people with the requisite experience in the domains and propose the names to the government. So, this is the recruitment and the process part, but the principle of lateral entry was not very clear to anyone. And essentially, people were talking about inducting or bringing in people on contract basis. This is not entry. It is not entry into the government as we understand it. So it was a X number of years contract, extendable by Y number of years, depending upon suitability. And there were no recruitment rules. There was no prescribed education, number of years of experience, salaries drawn, nothing was clear. So we had to really get descriptions of these things by interacting with the secretaries of those ministries and departments for which the government proposed to induct the joint secretary level officers. So, if the intent is to bring in fresh blood, to get in new thought processes, up-to-date education, then I guess this is certainly one way of doing it. But if I speak personally, I would reiterate that this is not entry. This is just coming into the government for a small period of time, doing whatever best you can do or whatever is assigned to you, and then going back. It's a revolving door. And, again, my personal view, revolving doors in something as sensitive as running the government should be debated. It's not as if, this is a solution which will fetch results, definitely. I think they're still doing a second stage of lateral entry. Again, this time at different levels. I think it's a DS director and JS level entry. And I would really feel that there has to be more clarity on this. There has to be more public discussion. And ultimately, there has to be more transparency on why we are doing it and what are the benefits which will accrue to the government. I still believe that people give off their best as institution builders when they know that they will rise and sink with the organization. So, I would still look at lateral entry as entry, a parallel stream where people will enter at different rungs with experience which is required by the government, and then they will progress. They will keep on getting promoted till they superannuate, so that they are responsible for whatever decisions they take, good or bad. If it's good, yes, accolades, wonderful work done. If it is not good, then like all other civil servants, they should face the consequences. So there has to be a price paid for not doing the job well. That's my view, and I would actually be looking forward to more transparency on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's been a very nuanced response to the question, and you've also clarified that it's basically a lateral service contract. So that's a very important aspect to it. Mr. J.V.R. Prasad Rao, sir, your views on this?
I'm not an expert on this, but let me just reflect based on the limited knowledge I have. Lateral entry is not something new in our administrative setup. We had examples of very eminent people from private sector, from economics and so many other fields coming into government at very senior positions, where people like Wadud Khan, P.K. Basu, Montek Singh Ahluwalia coming directly as secretaries and holding those positions. But that we never thought as lateral entry because that is specific to certain positions and also because of the outstanding qualities those individuals possessed. And we wanted that particular expertise to come into the government system seamlessly and they can contribute. And they stayed in the system and they retired from the system. But what is now being thought as a lateral entry is not lateral entry, it is a parallel entry. Because you have an organization called UPSC created under the constitution to recruit senior civil servants, which is already available, I think which is doing a great job in recruiting the best possible brains. Well, we are not able to sort of nurture them into senior positions, that's a different thing, but they all, when they enter the service, they are outstanding officers. Then there is something wrong with the system, the way we are promoting them in the service, the way we are utilizing their talents, the way we are putting them under training, etc., building their capacity to hold various positions in the government. That is the fault of the system. We cannot fault those individuals for that. So basically this lateral entry, if it is promoted on a regular basis, I think it will not be good, it will not be conducive to good governance. But if you cite outstanding people outside the system, I think we should have that channel open to bring them into the government and then ask them to serve as regular officers just like any one of us, and I think contribute. That is the best way to do it. But creating a parallel stream of entry, I somehow don't think it is a good governance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I request the author of the book and the staff for today evening?
So I think we have already spent a lot of time on this, and I have discussed it in detail in my other book on the IAS. But I just wanted to put another perspective. Why only lateral entry in the context of a so-called IAS and joint secretary? If I take MNRE as an example today, we want hydrogen, we want bioenergy, we want storage. These are important issues. But we are not thinking of lateral entry of scientists with expertise into the system. And that is where perhaps lateral entry has more meaning. I would recommend that and share the views which have been expressed earlier about the main service. And maybe now we can think of other questions.
Okay, there are two more questions from the audience. One of them is directly related to training in the academy. So I'll just very briefly mention, you see that the difference between, say, 3 decades ago and now is that, as pointed out by Mr. Deepak Gupta, earlier we were being told that it is knowledge, skills, and attitude. Today we try to emphasize that it is attitude which is the most important. The other major difference is that at that, for 30 years ago, we thought that individuals can make a difference. Now we emphasize and focus on the fact it is not individuals, but teams will make a difference. That's the point which Mr. Deepak Gupta also. It is not the collector alone, it is the collector and the SP and the prosecution officer and the district officer of health and the executive engineer. Unless they all work as a team, unless we all work as a team, we will not be able to deliver. So it's not one individual success, it is the success of a team which makes all the difference. So I think this is what I want to share with you. We'll have to close now because at 6 o'clock we must wind up. There's one more question by an IAS officer, A. Chandra, who says that contracts must have deliverable and measurable milestones. If that is allowed, then the payout must be linked to the purpose for which they have been contracted, that's performance. I think it's in the nature of a comment, and I think all of us agree with this comment. So maybe we'll request Mr. Deepak Gupta to say the last 3 minutes left. So over to you, sir, for your panel remarks. It's been a lovely conversation. I've enjoyed it, and I'm sure our panelists have enjoyed it. And I hope that all those who are listening to us have also enjoyed it. Over to you, sir, for the last panel.
Well, what can I say? Whatever I had to say, I had already said in the beginning. I feel, when I'm writing the history of the IAS, I was fascinated by what Sardar Patel had thought of the service at that time. And I think his words today, the words of wisdom that he had, must be the cornerstone of the approach of the government towards the administrative services. And his words of wisdom to the IAS officers must also be seen. Because he said, if you don't do public service, then you are nothing. You cannot just think of anything else. For the service, he said, unless there is an esprit de corps, then there is no service. And I think we are lacking in that today. People, esprit de corps means you establish certain codes of conduct, certain boundaries, etc., which we have to live up to. And Sardar Patel mentioned that the most important thing which he said was that, if a secretary disagrees with me and does not tell me that he disagrees for various reasons, then I will change the secretary. So what he said was that dissent or voices of difference which leads to discussion must come in the system. And so all these things have to be combined. I think it's a very important role that we are playing. Also as policy designers, but as you yourself mentioned in the beginning and Mr. Prasada Rao emphasized, on the implementation part, because that's where we are really missing out. And I hope young officers will have that spirit that they are actually contributing to the development of the nation, and that is how they function, and they should not, lose heart or become, cynical and things like that, and just sort of pass time. So that's the main message of the book that I'm trying to give by giving my examples. I hope it helps in a small way, and if it does a little bit, it will be my labor well, spent.
Absolutely, sir. And in fact, Sardar Patel's stirring words that you will not have a united India unless you have a good all India service, which has the freedom and the independence to speak out its mind. With these words, we come to the close of this wonderful session. Over to you, Amrit, for your concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining today's session, and a big thank you to the entire panel.
Join us, but thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that you will recommend this YouTube video to your friends, because this is archived forever. So we hope that you will request your friends to take a look at this and keep in touch. Oh, I see Amrit here back again.
Yes.
Amrit, over to you for your final comments.
Thank you, sir. Just allow me a second, please. Yes. Thank you everyone for joining today's session and the book launch of Sir's latest book. We are very, very proud and privileged to be a part of this event as a publisher. And thank you so much to the entire panel, to Dr. Chopra for hosting the event and making it something which is so immersive and knowledgeable, something I learned a lot from all of you today. Thank you, Mr. Rao and Mr. Saxena, for joining in as well. And thank you, Mr. Gupta, again for choosing us to publish your book. And for all of you who are looking to get your copy, please, you can get the link to buy it from Amazon or Flipkart from the description of the video. And we hope to see you again. I'll request all the panelists to also come again to our channel and have more talks. And we'd love to be able to host you again. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day, have a good evening, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.